So this is going to be the final video, which is somewhat of a conclusion, but I'm also going to explain to you how you could combine these different approaches. First things first, please pilot your questions to your team members, colleagues, friends. Try them out, write them down, send them in the WhatsApp group, whatever it is, because your perspective and how you perceive certain things might be different from the common thought process behind this specific idea, subject, whatever it is. So please make sure that you try those out and actually see what the audience, whoever it is at that point, has to say, so you are more prepared and understand what type of replies you can get. Now let's finish off with how you can combine these different approaches. I've explained them in separate videos and they are quite strong on their own, but in the end the trick is to combine them, and this is where the more advanced type of questioning comes into play. So let's say I'm starting off a conversation on my presentation in the auditorium. It's filled up with students, and I'm going to begin by asking them a question. Please stand up. It's not even a question. So please stand up if you have ever hit the snooze button too many times. So you basically slept in. In this case, probably 99% is going to stand up. And how I know this is because I've piloted this question among 10 students, and all the 10 of them would stand up. Besides that, I'm a student myself, so I could relate to it. But I still pilot the question towards at least a couple of friends, so I know what the reply might be. So in the example, 99% is going to stand up, and this is the hope of the wide reply approach. I want the entire audience to participate, and I get the 99% of the audience to stand up. Now I'm going to combine this with the approach in which I'm going to ask rhetorical questions, or rhetorical commands in this case, and going to dive a bit deeper into them. So I'm going to become more specific along the way. So I'm going to continue for everybody who's currently standing up. Please remain standing if you have snoozed too often, but then as a result you also had to skip certain things in the morning, so you had to either skip breakfast, skip the shower, or whatever it is. Please be seated if you don't. So then in this case maybe a couple students would drop, but still so many students would be standing in front of this at this auditorium. So I'm becoming a bit more specific again, right? And in this case, even though it's somewhat of a shamed subject, still most of the people are standing up and are looking at each other. Yeah, we're all the same, right? We all have done this as well, at least once in our lives. Then I can still continue and say, okay, who of you actually, when you went to the university after you have slept in, also felt like it's one of the less productive days of the week just because you screwed up in the morning and hit the snooze button too often? Most students would still stand up, right? And then my final question would be, okay, please still remain standing if this all had to do because your inner voice told you had to stand up, but you decided to ignore it. And that's my final question to round off this subject, right? So this is asking 4 questions which are going to go a bit more into details every single time. And I basically introduce my subject of listening to your gut feeling towards the end. And that's one of the approaches you could do to actually combine these different questioning approaches into a very powerful final approach. And in my case, I would have everybody standing in front at the end of the audience, or at the end of my introduction. So I might also make a question which makes everybody seated again. But I could also say, okay, please feel free to be seated again. But that's up to me, and that is just more another trick you have to do to actually get them seated again. It's about the smoothness of the entire experience. Let's see if there's another different thing I could do. So I've asked a couple of rhetorical questions. I went a bit more in depth. In this case I opened a very specific question. But I could also continue now when everybody is seated again, or even if everybody is still standing up, I could walk up to them and say, okay, how many times do you snooze? Because I would rather get the answer 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and I could use this specific answer again into my story. So when I'm speaking about myself sleeping in or not listening to myself, I could again use the same number. So let's say I'm going to the audience, everybody's still standing up, I walk towards them and I'm asking them the question, okay, you over there, how many times do you snooze when you decide to snooze? How often do you hit the snooze button? And if she says or he says 4 times, and I go and everybody sees it, and I continue with my story, and I'm going to explain that I was not listening to myself and I was ignoring my own story, I'm going to say, well, I ignored myself also 4 times. Or I'm going to use that number again, and then I'm asking again for a specific answer of which I know I could use the answer throughout my story. So this is using multiple approaches along the way. And I believe in week 6 we are also going to cover walking patterns, and this is like the final thing I'm going to explain to you guys and try and keep it again as short as possible. So we have covered all the approaches, but now, and as we're going to do it in class as well, walking patterns. Let's say you're standing in front of an auditorium and you have a fixed spot, so you don't really walk around that much, or you walk around like 2 steps to the left and then 2 steps to the right. So you have a certain area of which you walk at every single time or throughout your entire talk. When you're asking the audience a question, please step out of that pattern and walk towards the audience. Also in your opening, if you're beginning with a question, walk towards the audience, and when your story starts, walk back towards where you would normally be walking around. Because when you're walking in a specific pattern, this is when your story is this is where the story is being told. And the moment you step out of this pattern, the audience will automatically perceive this, okay, we're going to go into a different direction for a moment. And also, if you want to ask a question, it's important that you direct the audience as well. So make sure you can do that. This is, again, a bit more advanced, but feel free to play around with it as we are going to use it in the upcoming weeks as well. This is basically it. Let me know what you think about it, and if this is something that's quite useful. So I might be doing it in the near future as well. Thanks.